Hi, my name is Mandy, and in April of the 16th of 1987, my good friend's sister and also my neighbor who lived two doors down went missing. And this is a story that I wanted to share with people about, what happened from the perspective of me as a child and what I knew about the family and what I think about what happened. Three things actually, before I really get started. I don't know how to edit, so if I ramble, go ahead. And I'm going to try to not use my friend's name for her own security. So I'm going to try to not say that. If I do, I apologize. Also, this is the memories of a young girl from well over 30 years ago, so I may not remember everything exactly. This isn't a true crime video where I have researched what happened. This is my recollections of what happened. So it's not like watching some true crime YouTuber who's verifying everything they're going to tell you. Also, when I tell you what I think happened, please understand those are my opinions. I don't want to get into any legal trouble or issues. It's not fact, and I cannot back up anything I'm saying, so I want to make that very clear. So basically, I grew up in Union City, Tennessee, and that's where Marlena Childress, who was my neighbor, went missing from. Union City is fairly isolated. I don't think people living there realize how much, but it's an hour from the interstate, 2 hours from a major city, an hour from even a middle-sized city. Growing up there as a child, they had a lot of what you call blue laws. I remember stores couldn't open till noon, and I think before I was born, at one point they couldn't open at all on Sunday. No alcohol other than some beer, and there was restrictions on that. So it's a small rural town. Things move and change slowly there, and I do think I'm bringing that up because I do think that the police force probably, was a little behind at that time, most likely when they were looking for clues about what happened. Also, we grew up on Division Street, so that's where she went missing from. Quite frankly, it wasn't the nicest neighborhood in town. It wasn't the worst. We weren't in the projects of a small city. Not that the projects are even that bad in a place like Union City, but it also wasn't the best neighborhood. So most of the homes were built in the 20s. And a lot of people who lived on our street were renters. They weren't homeowners. The house that was directly next to mine was abandoned. And I used to love to sneak behind my parents' back and play in that house, actually, when I didn't think I could get caught. And the house next to that was very dilapidated. And the reason I know it was dilapidated is because there would be different kids who would move in and out of that house during the different summers. And I would play there, and I got hurt numerous times just in the yard or in that house because the house was literally falling apart. And the house next to that was Marlena's house, Marlena Childress, the girl who went missing. So she was 4 when she went missing. She spent a lot of time at our house. I knew the little girl. Her stepsister was my friend, and the stepsister would come down on weekends and would spend most of that weekend actually playing with me at my house. She would spend the night, 1 to 2 nights for the weekend, actually. And the girl Marlena was close to my sister's age, although my sister was slightly older, and would play. She was very quiet. She was reserved. Didn't have a lot to say, not at all rambunctious, but also I never saw signs of abuse. She was well fed. She had silver cap teeth, which back then would have been an expensive dental treatment, particularly for a young child. Her hair was kind of cut, so that means she was, going and, having her hair regularly cut at least and trimmed and such. And she had, like I said, when she was kidnapped, she had on her jelly shoes. So that also speaks to the fact that her mom was buying her, for the time, some, fashionable clothing. So we never suspected abuse of any kind. A lot of the kids in the neighborhood would play at our house because we had a really large yard. My parents bought us bikes and scooters and things to play with outdoors. And my dad owned a video store at the time, and so we had videos, always movies to watch, and Nintendo games to play. So it was pretty normal that the kids would be at our house. So the fact that they were there I didn't feel like they were running from anything. You know, it was normal for kids to be at our house. I only spent the night at their house one time, however, and I found out once I was there that Pam Bailey, who is the mother of Marlena Childress, the girl who went missing, had actually asked that I spend the night. And the reason why is because she intended to leave that night. She was going to leave her children. So Marlena had a stepbrother too, and the stepbrother did end up staying with us. She did last minute decide to take Marlena with her, and she was gone most of the night. She left around 10 o'clock, and I know I was about 9 at the time when all this went down. I know that she wasn't home around 1 or 2 in the morning. We were watching movies, and, you know, I actually started to get a little afraid because I'm a little kid by myself. The next morning, she was there magically. She made us, didn't wake us up when she got there, and she was making us cereal. And the brother who, me and him would kind of, you know, like little girl and little boy would, maybe not always want to play together, and he hit my elbow. I spilled cereal, and Pam asked me to clean it up, and I was like, I'm not cleaning that up because I'm a kid, and the boy did it. And she was just like, fine, you're never coming back here again. And I was like, I remember thinking, okay. And I remember also thinking, if she got smart with me, I would just tell my parents that she had left us alone for the night, and my parents would have been livid. You know, I had, for the time, you know, it wasn't unusual for kids to play outside by themselves, run up and down the neighborhood, but my parents were never like that. They were very protective of us, and I don't think they ever would have dreamed that Pam, and I think the father's name was Johnny. I don't know if it was Marlena's father, but my friend's father, I think his name was Johnny. And so that's part of it. Before I get into the story of what happened that day, I'd like to talk about the fact that no one really talks about the men in Marlena's life, and I find that really very strange. So Pam Bailey is the mom, and I can tell you from the time I spent with her, looking back, she was very obviously on some kind of drugs. I would say probably opiates of some kind, but this was the 80s, so she kind of always, her forehead didn't move a lot, and she was just kind of like this a lot, and she looked very tired all the time. So she didn't have a lot of expression in her face, and always seemed very sleepy, very tired, like she could barely move. I think she was most certainly on drugs and most probably had mental health issues, considering how the times I spent with her, which wasn't a lot. She always seemed irritable, easily frustrated. So she was 20 when Marlena went missing, which would have meant Marlena was 4. So if you do the math, she almost certainly had to have been in high school. I graduated high school at 18. I guess some people graduate earlier, but she was most certainly in high school. And I don't know if she married Marlena's father or not. I don't know the relationship, but she had her child all the time. She was spending no time with her father, and the father is never in any interviews. Do some research and see if you find his name pop up, maybe figure out who he is. He's not involved. So I don't understand that. That's very strange to me. And then the stepfather I never see any interviews with him. I only remember his name. I don't remember I looking anything up ever and seeing his name. So he had to have been at least 10 years older than her. So that's strange to me that she was with a man who was much older than her. And that comes into play later when I'm telling you what I think happened. So the day that she disappeared, it was a Good Friday weekend. And actually I didn't remember that. I had to look it up because my memory wasn't piecing together correctly. I remember walking home that day, and I was not supposed to walk home. So my mother worked. There was no sitter for me. My grandmother had been sitting me, and she was getting very frail and elderly. And I didn't have to be home long, maybe an hour and 10 or 15 minutes. Wasn't long. So she was starting to let me stay home by myself. I'm 9 years old. And I did not like to ride the bus because I didn't like a lot of the kids on that bus. And if I walked home, I could, take some change and get a Coke and a candy bar on my way home. And my teacher at the time also had this habit of keeping us after class, okay? And I was one of the few kids who rode the bus. So the bus at that time wasn't a county school bus. You had to pay to ride it. Union City did not have a regular bus service, and almost every other child's mother didn't work, and so they were just riding with their mothers home. There was only like a couple other kids my age on the bus because of that. So I was quite a bit younger and smaller than a lot of the other kids on there. And if my teacher kept me late, I honestly didn't mind walking, so I wasn't. But looking back, I'm like, why didn't this bus driver wait for me? I'm like this little kid and my parent is paying you to take you home. Like, why did you leave? And why were you like putting me in the back with high school kids? Like, why wouldn't you have put me, like, I'm 9, I'm like 4 feet tall. What is happening? But it was different times. And so I did walk home that day, and it was kind of a far distance. If I remember correctly, I would have been passing by Marlena's front yard between 3 and 3:30. Now, this is important because Marlena's mother, Pam, said that Marlena went missing from her yard at 3:30, that she was playing in the front yard at that time period, and that she heard his tires screeching and she sees this red car. And I'm going to tell you, Marlena was not in the yard. In fact, if I can be frank with you, I walked home probably one day a week until my mother found out what was going on. I liked Cokes and candy bars. What can I say? I'm like 4th grade. So I never saw her play outside. I never saw her play outside by herself. The only time I saw this girl play outside is when she came to our house, which makes sense. How many 4-year-olds want to play outside alone? It's not like our street was really busy at that time period. So she wasn't outside that day. I can almost guarantee you that little girl was not outside that day. But here's the interesting part. I did see a car, and it really scared me. And I had seen that car a few times before. The car wasn't red. It was a brown car, or maybe rust. It's been a very long time. And it was an older model. In my brain, I thought it was like a 70s car, but it could have been very early 80s. I wouldn't have known. And so the way our houses were is this is a street, and then there's 3 houses, and then another street. And we were both on the ends where they're cross streets. The road went further. This was a very long road, but we were like this. And this car was by my house, which is why I was afraid. And like watching me, and there was something about it that made me very creeped out, and I ran as fast as my little legs could carry me to my house. And I believe I'd seen that car before, like kind of creeping around, and it had always made me feel uncomfortable. Do I think it was related? Maybe. I don't know. And I'll get into what it could have been, how I think it might have been if it was related. So I go home. My mother's none the wiser what happened. I'm not telling anybody I walked home because I would have got a spanking back then for that. And we ordered pizza, and there's a knock on the door, and it's my friend and her brother who were knocking, the stepsister and stepbrother, who are knocking on the door to see if we'd seen Marlena. Now, in my brain, I researched the day, and I saw it was a Thursday, and I couldn't figure out why they would have been there on a Thursday because they were only there Fridays and Saturdays. And it was because it was Good Friday. So it was like a Friday for us. That's why we were ordering pizza. That's why things were winding down. So it was like Good Friday before Easter. And we're like, no, we haven't seen her. And we thought it was weird and went back about our business. And then an hour or so later, the police come. They're knocking. They're asking my parents questions. Over the next few weeks, Marlena's mother, Pam's story changed multiple times. So this is a story that she gave. The first time was that she had let Marlena outside to play. She had heard tires screech. She looked out. She saw a red car. And somehow the stepbrother also saw this red car and some store owner, which makes no sense because there are no stores close to Division Street. It's not close. So why are you taking note of a random... That doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think the brother saw anything either. I don't think this red car existed. I think that a little boy wanted people to pay attention to what he had to say. And I don't know about the shopkeeper. Maybe the power of persuasion. Yeah, I really did see that. There was no red car. And I don't think that she ever, I don't think she was taken from her front yard either. Anyways, that's what she said happened. And then later she was put in a mental institution for a while, and then came out and she admitted that she had killed her and thrown her body into the Obion River. And then she said she had somebody help her, and then that guy had an alibi, and then she said she sold her for drugs, and then she said this other guy come to her house who had been sexually abusing her. This is the third story, the third time. And the guy who was sexually abusing her wanted to sexually abuse Marlena, and when she said no, the guy just took her. Okay. Can I just say that if somebody just took my child, or I thought that I saw a red car running off with my kid, I would have gotten my car and I'd been speed deming it. This is before cell phones. So I would have been chasing that car down, because by the time you get a police there, it makes no sense. But anyways, regardless, that's what she said. Years later, 12 to 15, I don't know exactly, I can't remember. She did have another son, I think with the Johnny guy who she did divorce. She took this son into a cemetery and then stabbed him on a grave that she had made for him. He escaped, got to a hospital, was saved, went to go live with his dad. Dad petitions. She got 10 to 15 years of imprisonment. I don't remember. The father of the boy, they're divorced, and he petitioned for her to get out of jail early, because he was fine with him being with his child. That's what I'm saying. Some of this stuff doesn't add up. I think that this man does know what probably happened to Marlena, and all of it seems very strange to me. So this is kind of, I can't put everything together, but what I really think probably happened. I think Pam has undiagnosed mental health issues, and women with mental health issues may not always act appropriately, and they may even be sorry for their actions later. I think that her issues were compounded by the fact that she wasn't getting treatment. We lived in a small town where things are backwards a little bit. And I think that she was self-treating, probably self-medicating with drugs. But if anyone listening has ever had interactions with people who are bipolar or narcissistic or whatever, drugs really makes it worse, even when they are being treated, but specifically if they're not. They can become extremely irrational. I mean, I don't want to give a whole lot about who I am and what I do over the internet, but I can just tell you I've had dealings with people, and they can become a little irrational. So I think that she, either one, the car that I saw was her drug dealer, which I think is very possible. I don't know that he was involved in Marlena being hurt or missing, but I do think he was probably I don't know who was in the car. I couldn't see at all who was in the car. I do think that this person was a drug dealer, small town, and he's just waiting for me to leave because he's suspicious of a child, probably anybody seeing him or her, drop off drugs. So there was that. And then I think if Marlena partook of these drugs, that she may have went into a state where she was irrational, and she might have done something to her. And I don't think that she necessarily did the things she did to her at the house. I mean, we have proof that she took the child somewhere, or took one of her children somewhere. And so I think it's also very possible that she took Marlena maybe to the Obion River, and she was put in the Obion River, and they just didn't find the body. And I think that family kind of knows. I think even the grandfather put up a big reward for her to be found, but I think maybe the grandfather didn't want to admit that his daughter had mental health issues. And I think it is possible that she had been sexually abused, and maybe that led to some of her mental health issues because of her dealings with men. We all know, if you know anything about sexual abuse, girls who are abused will become sexually active at a younger age. And yeah, And I don't necessarily think, by the way, when I say that she was with an older man who was like had to have been 9 or 10 years older than her at least, I don't necessarily think that this is a really terrible, awful person. I do think he probably knew what happened, but I never felt that. I know that his other children were very well adjusted. They were fun. We enjoyed their company, so I don't think he was necessarily bad. But it does make sense for a young girl who's that young to be with someone so much older. You know, there's things that are behind those actions. Not always. Don't be offended if my dad was older than my mom, but it can mean that. It can be a symptom of, abuse. So those are, that's my idea of what happened. I've seen a few YouTubers do stories on Marlena, not a lot of people. I just kind of wanted to clear the record. I also wanted to take a moment and talk about Summer Wells. And the reason I wanted to take this moment is I'm extremely offended by some of the comments I see online about people who are like, oh, you guys are, if you paint the mom and the dad as bad people at all, that you're being classist, and that's their culture, and that's just the way things are, and they're just poor. So I'm from Tennessee. I'm from a rural area in Tennessee, and I just want to say very unequivocally, no back or forth on it. I'm being very point blank right now. That is not normal behavior. Not everybody who is poor is on drugs. Not everyone who is poor has a dirty home. Not everyone who is poor. I saw someone say something like, well, there's a culture of, you love your sons more than your daughter, when they were trying to say why they didn't look upset over her being dead. That is not a thing. Not in Tennessee anyways. That is not a thing. I know plenty of very, very poor people from Tennessee, and their children are very well cared for. Their houses are not a mess. They don't do drugs. I mean, being poor doesn't mean uneducated, and it doesn't mean that you are an unkempt person, and being from the South doesn't mean that. You can just stop that. And then not only that, but I don't think they're poor. I think they mismanage their money. They live on 11 acres in Tennessee. Property in Tennessee goes for a lot of money, no matter where it's at in Tennessee. People like to come out here to retire. People from California are buying plots of land sight unseen. If they really were hard up for money, I'm sure they could sell that property. So I don't think they're poor. I think they mismanage their money, but they definitely have money for beer and cigarettes and drugs. So I don't really think they're poor. I don't know if they did it or not, and I'm not making claims to that, but stop saying that people are classist for thinking that they did, or that acting like everyone from Tennessee is like that, or poor people are like that, or that's the culture. It is not my culture. Yeah, no, stop it. Anyways, that's the story I wanted to tell. If you have any questions, you can put it in the comments. I don't know everything. One last time, I don't know that is for sure what happened. I can't, prove anything. This is just the ramblings of a girl who lived close and saw things kind of close up. Bye.